Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Happy Father's Day to all of those dads out there, and I hope your day was full of joy and wonderfulness. Today I'm going to be revisiting a subscriber's encounter. I have messaged this subscriber. I'm waiting for them to get back to me, and I'm just going to re-narrate it so you guys can hear it, and that way if they agree to share it over the microphone, you guys will recognize it. Anyway, before we get into it, a couple links. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help this channel to continue to grow and go. All of those links are in the description below. I also have a second channel for creepypasta, fanfiction, and scary voice acting. Stories that they really don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything that you're into, follow that link and give those stories a listen. You may just like what you hear. Now I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's encounter. Shall we? My encounter is an auditory encounter, as we never saw the thing. When I was 10, my grandfather and father purchased 56 acres of land in East Texas between Lake Fork and Lake Tawakoni. The land was purchased from a wheelchair-bound man whose wife took over tending to the farm with help from sharecroppers from Mexico that lived in a little shack on the back 5 acres of land right next to a pond. We called it our lake house. My parents purchased a mobile home, but it would be a few months before it would be delivered. My younger brother and I lived with our grandparents in an old pier and beam farmhouse for the remainder of the summer and into the beginning of the school year, so we'd be able to start school that year on time. Despite the farmhouse's dilapidated condition, it had a brand new, fully enclosed back porch that housed a washer, dryer, deep freezer, and storage unit. There were 2 screen doors on opposite ends of the porch. One led to a carport, and the other out toward the goat yard and crop fields. I've always been an adventurous type of girl, so at my 10-year-old age, this place was a dream. My brother and I had a treehouse in every tree we could manage. We spent all of our time, when we weren't helping harvest crops, playing in the creek and ponds on the property. The main road ran in front of our property about a quarter of a mile down. There was this massive hill with a bridge at the bottom going over the creek. Once you came up the other side of that hill, there was a sharp 90-degree curve that led you back out to the main highway. This was a gravel road, I should mention. At first, we liked to walk down the road and play in the creek. But then we started to notice how eerily quiet it was down there, and the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. As the summer grew to a close and the sharecroppers moved off of the land, the son of the sharecroppers told my brother and I about a young girl who was found slaughtered in the creek just a few weeks before my family purchased the farm. Her murder was never found. That left us with an even more uneasy feeling. We began to notice how eerily silent and feeling of being watched began happening down at the lake house, which is what we called that shack on the pond the sharecroppers lived in. Actually, the feeling of being watched seemed to happen any time we were without adult supervision. One night the goats and chickens were making an awful ruckus. My grandfather had been told by some of the other local farmers there was a massive cat snagging livestock from their herds. He immediately grabbed his .22 and told me to grab a flashlight. I obeyed, and we were out the door. Once we had cleared both gates that led to the goat yard, things were silent except for the sounds of a creaking floorboards of the hayloft above the goat barn. We could hear something huge walking around above our heads as they approached barn. I thought my grandfather felt the same feeling of dread that I did the closer we got to the barn. My grandfather leveled his weapon, and immediately there was this blood-curdling growl, howl, scream that came reverberating through our chests. I was frozen in place. My 10-year-old brain couldn't comprehend what we had just heard. My next memory is my grandfather screaming at me in a tone of voice I had never heard or since that occasion. "Run, Kitten, run!" Kitten was my nickname my grandparents called me. We both ran the 70 yards, jumped over the 2 gates, back to the house in what felt like a lifetime. My grandfather never would tell me what he saw, but from that moment until he died 6 years later, he never wanted us to go outside alone at night. Like I said, we never saw the thing, but the feeling and sound we got from this thing was otherworldly. We lost a few goats that year and began keeping the mama and babies on that enclosed back porch for the first few weeks of their life, in effort to keep them safe. Jeff, this is the follow-up to my encounter. We recently went to my uncle's 50th birthday party at his house. He still lives on the land in East Texas that my poppy and I had our auditory encounter on. While at the party and after a few drinks, someone mentioned how incredibly dark it is out there and how beautiful the stars are. My uncle's usual goofy and boisterous demeanor changed immediately. He said, "Yeah, I used to like to come out here and stargaze, but not anymore." We asked him why, and he said we wouldn't believe him if he told us. I knew immediately he had seen that damn thing. I just looked at him and gently said, "What did you see, Unc?" "There's some weird shit out here, and I guarantee I believe you." His light gray eyes began to well with tears as he lit a cigarette and muttered, "Fuck. Okay, here goes." He took a long drag and started off with, "Y'all know I drink. Y'all know I'm a fucking alcoholic, but I swear to God this happened. I'm not bullshitting. I may get drunk enough to call a bearded officer ma'am, but never have I ever been so pissed I hallucinated like this. Plus, I have proof. This happened, okay?" We all reassured him that he was safe to tell us what happened. At that time, my dad piped up and said, "Brother, I remember you calling me when this happened. I know you're not lying." My uncle smiled a soft smile and took a drag off his cigarette and said thanks. "Brother," he shook the tears off of his face and said, "Okay, so y'all know when I get hammered I like to lie in my truck cab, listening to the radio and stargazing, right?" We all nod. He continues, "One night about, 10 years ago now, I was out there, laid up with my feet on the door panel against the driver's side and my head against the passenger side, cocked back looking at the stars. It was just so beautiful, man." He paused, and I noticed he was visibly shaking. I was lying there smoking a cig, so the window was cracked about a quarter of the way open. So I was lying there, singing like a fool, and all of a sudden the entire truck shook. It shook like when you drop a ton of gravel in the bed of the truck. I knew the tailgate was open, so I immediately was like, "What the fuck was that?" I'm lying there still as can be, thinking one of you fuckers was messing with me. No sooner than that crossed my mind, something jumped on 2 feet up on the cab of my truck. Y'all hear me? 2 feet. So now I'm freaking the fuck out, and I don't know why. I'm sweaty, I'm shaking, and it was like every last ounce of goodness in the world was sucked right out, and all that was left was despair and pure terror. As my mind is trying to figure this shit out, I realize it's gotten dark in the truck. There's no moonlight, no stars. Nothing. He pauses, tears streaming down his face. He looks up and says, "It was looking at me. The fucking thing was on top of the truck, leaned over, looking in the window at me. I pissed myself. I've been drinking all my life, and never have I ever sobered up that fast. It was growling at me. I could feel it. My whole body shook as this thing leaned in closer and growled again. I could see spit dripping off its teeth, and it had red eyes. The most soulless, God-forsaken red eyes. It was a demon. I'm telling you, it was a fucking demon that showed up in the shape of a werewolf. There, I said it. It was a goddamn werewolf. He began to sob. My dad put his arms around his little brother, hugging him and telling him, "It's okay, you're safe, brother." My uncle, a man that had carried me in his arms as he ran for our lives into the cellar away from a tornado, the same man that used his body to shield me from the lightning strike that hit the barn not 50 yards from us, was reduced to rubble at the sight of this thing. I watched in silence as my dad and his other brother comforted their youngest brother and helped him gain his composure. It was a rather moving sight. These are 3 good old boys from Texas. They are truly a man's man, crass and burly, but in that moment they were all compassionate and gentle with their brother, who is so clearly hurting. They just don't make men like that anymore. My uncle composed himself and finished his story. I screamed like I had never screamed before. Without even thinking, I'm screaming, "Jesus, help me, Jesus." The thing snorted or sneezed and looked pissed. That was when I knew I was dead. I had my 12 gauge on the floorboard, so I was desperately searching for it with my right hand. Before I knew it, the damn thing jumped off the truck and bolted on 2 feet like a damn Olympian into the woods. I sat there, shaking for I don't know how long. I was terrified to get out of the truck. I do know I sat there until the sun came up. I wasn't fucking taking chances with this thing. My 12 gauge would have been like a tummy tickle to this thing. So I really didn't want to have to engage it. Kitten, you remember what happened to you and Dad in that goat barn? Yeah, he saw that fucking thing. He's seen it many times, which was why he was always walking the fence lines at night, and would lose his mind if you or your brother were outside at night. That's why he started walking y'all to the bus. One of the last things Dad told me before he died was make sure them damn things don't get the babies, as he pointed to me and my brother, then motioned over where our now grown cousins were standing. It has taken exactly 22 years for me to have confirmation, but I know now without a doubt my poppy, Dad, and uncles weren't just messing around in the bar for fun. They were warding this thing off of our property by any means necessary. My poppy died in 2000, leaving us with a gaping hole in our hearts, and 1 man down on the surveillance team. Shortly after that, all of us but my uncle and his wife moved off the land. He says to this day he knows when that thing is around because even the wind goes silent. He won't leave his house no matter what. When that happens, and frankly, I don't blame him. I don't know what these things are, but I agree with my uncle. They are demons in the flesh. This encounter scared my uncle, but it also rooted his faith in Christ again because he knows what the face of pure evil looks like. Wow. Now, I have narrated a lot of subscriber encounters, and they all affect me in one way or another. There are a few that I just have a hard time forgetting, and this is one of them. Just because it has so much, I don't know, power. I don't even know if that's the right word. But it just shows you that, you know, this lady's grandfather, her dad, and her uncles were all very hard men from Texas. You know, doesn't really matter where you're from or how hard you are, but it shows that once you see one of these things, it can break you just by the sight, because your mind doesn't let you forget. And this one story has stuck with me for a long time. I've got probably 50 stories like this that have stuck in my head. And like I said, I reached out to this lady to hopefully have her on the show, so she can share in her words her family's experiences with these walking wolves, dogman, werewolf, whatever you want to call them, whatever they are. But I'm starting to really, really believe that these things don't have any good in them anymore. You know, for a little bit, I wanted to think that some of them had some sort of goodness or could have some goodness. But I don't think so anymore. I really don't. The more that I narrate, the more that I talk with people, the more that I read, the more I think that these things are just really pissed off at humanity, and they don't want us around. So, I don't know. But like I said, guys, I've reached out to this woman, and hopefully she will get back to me so we can hear this in her words. Once again, happy Father's Day, everybody. And even if you're not a dad, I hope your day was great. And with that, I want to bid you farewell.